If you enjoy this video and would like to hear more of my stories, please click like and subscribe to be notified of when I release a new story. Manchester City had one of English football's most notorious firms back in the 1970s and 80s, and a former member has opened up about what life was like in the group. And it's not for the faint-hearted. Manchester City and Millwall might be the furthest thing from rivals these days, but that wasn't the case back in the 80s. At the height of football hooliganism, rivalries between firms often constituted rivalries between fan bases, and Man City's notorious GUVNORS gang absolutely despised Millwall's infamous Bushwhackers. Then again, who didn't? According to former firm leader Mickey Francis, the GUVNORS had some of their most gruesome clashes with the Bushwhackers, particularly when they travelled down to southeast London. The thing about Millwall, they don't do a lot of dancing up and down. They walk right up to you and whack you, Mickey wrote in GUVNORS, a book detailing life as a Man City hooligan. We were coming up the steps from the tube station and we hear a low chant, dead slow. Millwall, Millwall. I said, where the fuck's that coming from? We looked behind us and saw loads of them pouring through from another entrance to the station. They had been waiting for us. There was a shout of, "Come on, you Northern Beastards," and they charged. Mickey said the two firms fought for a full 5 minutes before being separated by police, but the battle was far from over. They still had to get in and then back out of Millwall's ground, the Den, which according to Mickey had an utterly evil atmosphere. When we reached the ground, Millwall made a last attempt to get at us. They went through the cops as if they weren't there and kicked it off at the turnstiles. We hit them back and had another skirmish before the horses came in. The atmosphere inside the Den was utterly evil, he added. At least half of their fans did not watch the game at all. They spent the whole time baying at us, picking out individuals in the crowd and shouting out what they were going to do to us after. To this day, I don't know what the score was. The police kept us in for half an hour, but even then, the car park was full of heads when we came out, all faced in our direction. The GUVNORS knew another brutal attack was coming, but they had to put on a show, as Mickey put it. Everyone was geeing each other up, saying, "Come on lads, stick together, let's have it." But really we were all thinking, who's going to walk at the front? Elsewhere in the book, Mickey admitted that tangling with bushwhackers was about as dangerous as it got for a hooligan. When it comes to fear, there are few things to match them being bushwhacked in a dark subway by several hundred Millwall boys, he wrote. It makes you wonder why you ever became a football hooligan. Millwall's hooligan reputation precedes them, and a former Manchester City hardman admitted they're the firm you'd least want to meet down a dark alley. Mikey Francis was once leader of City's GUVNORS, who were one of the most notorious hooligan gangs in the 70s and 80s. They clashed with a whole host of other fans, but of them all, it was the Millwall supporting bushwhackers who Francis was most frightened of. When it comes to fear, there are few things to match being bushwhacked in a dark subway by several hundred Millwall boys, he wrote in his aptly named 1997 autobiography, GUVNORS. It makes you wonder why you ever became a football hooligan. Our Donald rates Millwall as the best firm in London. He and some of the lads had a big ruck with them at the train station one year when we played Arsenal. I crossed swords with them in two of the most violent encounters the GUVNORS ever had. The first was on September 16th, 1987. We were both in Division 2. There were some good firms there, Millwall, Middlesbrough, Leeds, Birmingham, and we all wanted to be top dog. So we planned a big ambush. It was a Wednesday night game and Millwall came on the train. They had a huge police escort to the ground and we couldn't get near them. After the game, we won 4-0 if anyone's interested. The cops locked them in the ground until 10 p.m. About 300 of us made our way to a small housing estate off Lloyd Street and gathered every milk bottle left on the doorsteps. As we waited in the darkness, a lone police dog handler drove up in his van. We were all massed there with everything you could think of to throw. There was no way he was going to stop us. Then we saw the Millwall escort coming down the road. We waited until they were about 15 yards away and let fly. The sky filled with missiles. Millwall got on their toes and we ran them down Lloyd Street. The police baton charged us, but we ran right through them. Millwall are made of stern stuff, however. They stopped and came back at us. Lads were laying into each other right across the road. The police got together, sirens blazing and horses charging, and finally chased us off through the estate. The police baton charged us, but we ran right through them. Millwall are made of stern stuff, however. They stopped and came back at us. Lads were laying into each other right across the road. The police got together, sirens blazing and horses charging, and finally chased us off through the estate. After leaving his hooligan days behind him, Francis worked as a pub landlord and a security boss, as well as dabbling in professional wrestling. But he was jailed for 4.5 years in 2016 for running a loan shark business. And the Manchester Evening News published the following article about the trouble and hatred between Manchester City and Millwall. The Den, Cold Blow Lane. Even the address of Millwall's ground brought a shudder to the spine of away fans brave enough to go there in the dark days of the 1970s and 80s. Things had not improved a great deal when Manchester City went to the new Den, just down the road, at a crossroads moment in their history. What happened next was a sweet and sour night which saw the Blues begin a fight back to which today's unprecedented success can be directly traced, but which also exposed the darker side of football's soul. Millwall fans had a history of violence and intimidation which stretched back 100 years, and in the 70s, when their hooligan firms, F-Troop and the Bushwhackers, were infamous, they also had sinister links to the far-right National Front. When Kevin Keegan's Blues made their way to southeast London on a cold Tuesday night in December 2001, they badly needed a win to get their season back on track. Keegan had assembled an attractive attacking team, and they were fancied to bounce straight back to the top flight at the first attempt. It was not going well. The Blues had lost 6 of their first 20 games and were 7 points behind leaders Burnley, and defeat at the Den would have seen Millwall leapfrog them into 4th place and City plummet to 9th. But what happened that night as fans racially abused City players, Sean Wright-Phillips, Sean Gota, Ali Benabia and Eyal Berjovic, helped to cement the team together and spark a winning run which sent the Blues careering to the Football League title. They returned in triumph to the Premier League, a year ahead of the vital move to the new City of Manchester Stadium, now known as the Etihad. The 1999 playoff final win over Gillingham is rightly labelled the biggest game in City's history, as the fightback began that day, but the win at Millwall against the odds is not far behind it. City's players had built a special bond with their fans as Joe Royle's team scrapped their way back from the brink of oblivion, roared on by their loyal away following. But this time, in South London, they were alone. Almost. 2 years earlier, when City and Millwall met at Main Road down in Division 2, a particularly inventive piece of vandalism by some Blues fans had led to serious trouble. The supporters had left the game early and carefully removed the windscreen wipers from the away fans' coaches, and, as it was raining, it meant the transport was unusable. The police made the decision to march the 500 visiting fans back to Piccadilly Station and stick them on the next train back to London. And that was a cue for trouble. The bother was serious enough that 3 seasons later, when City's charge back to the Premier League had been reversed by instant relegation, and Millwall had just been promoted, the decision was taken to ban away fans from the 2 league meetings between the clubs. So when City's team coach, guarded by a strong police presence, made its way through the tight South London streets to the Den, they knew they would not have the comfort of their loud away support. In fact, 30 to 40 City fans had managed to find their way into the ground, blending in with the locals, desperate not to miss a match which would prove to be a turning point in the season. One of those fans was Sean Riley, a City fan who had not missed a game for 12 seasons and was desperate to keep his record intact. He managed to find a way in and continue an unbroken run of loyal support, only broken by another fan ban when he failed to get into CSKA Moscow in 2014. "The old den wasn't great," said Sean from Chadderton. "The fans used to come away from the ground with the team. We were held back in pens and the team bus was escorted out of the area by the police with the fans, like a military convoy. One evening game there, our coach had its windows put through. Every time we went to the old den, the coaches were bricked. If you were an away fan, it was just accepted that you had to duck as you came away from the ground for 2 or 3 miles. Just keep your head down." But he was undaunted, and, together with wife Jane and 2 pals, they set about finding a way to see the game they weren't allowed to attend. "We applied for tickets through Ticketmaster, but they knocked us back due to the Manchester postcodes. So I wrote to Theo Pafitis, who was Millwall chairman at the time, telling him I was on an unbeaten run and had to see the game. A Scottish security guy from Millwall rang me to say, 'Do not, under any circumstances, attempt to come to the stadium for this game.' I just thought, I'll be there, don't worry. I knew a City fan who was a postman in South East London, so he had the right postcode and was able to go to the ground and buy 4 over the counter. He sent them up by registered post. We played Grimsby on the Saturday before, and Greater Manchester Police had spotters who used to work City and United. They knew us and we knew them. They also knew we were fans, and not in any way trouble causers. I knew a City fan who was a postman in South East London, so he had the right postcode, and was able to go to the ground and buy 4 over the counter. He sent them up by registered post. Cliff was one of them. He's retired now, but was a very friendly face, and a City fan, and he understood where we were coming from. He said to us at Grimsby, 'I know the answer to my question, so I'm not going to ask it.' When we got to Bermondsey Station on the Tuesday night, the GMP spotters were at the bottom of the hill. Cliff was there, clocked us, and looked the other way. He wasn't going to cause any problems. He knew we were going to go and see that game, and was happy to play his part. It was the old school way of doing things. When we got there, my wife bought a Millwall hat. My best pal Wilkie got a scarf and I put a lapel badge on. We were worried about the stuff all looking new, so we tried to scuff it up. City Chairman David Bernstein also remembers the night well, as he was on the team bus as it made its way through South London, like a stagecoach with a cavalry escort rattling through Apache country. We came in on the team coach with very heavy police protection. The hostility and aggression was at a much higher level than usual, he said. Once inside the ground, the hostility reached fever pitch. One journalist who regularly watched City was there that night and says, "I remember Sean Gota getting a lot of stick in the warm-up and diffusing it with humour, putting his hand behind his ear as if to say he couldn't hear, which just wound them up a bit more. It was a terrible atmosphere. It wasn't the entire crowd, but it was bad. They probably thought it gave their team an edge, but I'm not sure it did. It just wound up the City players a bit more." Keegan City was starting to surge with belief, and saw an opportunity in the adversity. City fans had the euphoria of 2 years under Joe Royle, and then a poor season back in the Premier League. But Keegan was infectious through his personality. He was great at dragging people along with him, said the journalist. He loved his swashbuckling football 1-0s were not on the agenda. He played Eyal Berkovic, Ali Benabia and Darren Huckabee all in the same team. A brave thing to do. They played with a smile, and the fans caught that mood. It wasn't a natural state for City fans, even when things are going well. Every game was a bit of them against us for City. At that time the Blues were a scalp, and they had the former England manager and European Footballer of the Year in charge. So no matter where they were, everyone wanted to take them down. When the Millwall club song, "Let 'em Come," was played before the game, the Rileys and their pal Wilkie, heavily disguised and with their heads down in the posh seats, joined in, putting on their best Dick Van Dyke Cockney accents. We tried to join in just to avoid anyone looking at us. In the end we probably over-egged it a bit, says Sean, a London-based City fan who also managed to get in, along with his 15-year-old daughter and a friend. was appalled at the levels of racist abuse. "It wasn't pleasant," he said. "We thought we'd be quiet and watch the game. We bought the most expensive tickets for the main stand as the safest bet, and thought we would be in with semi-normal people, rather than knuckle-draggers." We were sitting next to a lad who looked like a student, with John Lennon glasses and a duffel coat, who was with his dad and granddad. We didn't let on we were City fans, but we were chatting with them about football. And when our team ran out, this studenty guy stood on his seat and started jumping up and down and making monkey noises. I thought, effing hell, great. I've been watching football for ages and seen some bad stuff. Following England abroad was bad enough, but this was a whole different world. City star Darren Huckabee said the players knew they were up against it that night. But if the Millwall fans thought they would intimidate the team, they got a nasty shock. It had the opposite effect. We knew it was vitally important we got straight back up into the Premier League, especially as we were moving into a new stadium. It was a little part of where City are now. Thank you for taking the time to watch my video. If you would like to see more, because I have many more stories to tell, then please like this video and click the subscribe logo in the bottom right of this screen. Thanks again and see you next time.